Jai here, and today I'm going to be diving into a piece of malware which was first publicly reported in March of 2020 by the security company Proofpoint. This malware has quickly become one of the most widely used information stealers around. That's right, today I'm diving into Redline Stealer. But don't let the name fool you. In addition to stealing information, Redline can also function as a malware downloader to deploy other pieces of malware. I've fetched 5 different injector wrappers which inevitably deploy Redline Stealer into memory for this video. As you can see, it didn't take long to find a common theme in many samples I've got here, in that these are all pretending to be hacks for the popular online game Fortnite. Fortnite isn't alone though, with malware samples including names such as Rust, Valorant, GTA 5 Loader, and much more. There's a good chance that if you're seeking out cracks or game hacks, it's only a matter of time before you wind up receiving Redline Stealer and you get hacked. But with so many different deployment methods for Redline Stealer, how can we perform analysis on this at scale? Well, the thing about Redline Stealer is that even with packers, encoding, obfuscation, encryption, and various deployment methods, as soon as it hits the memory of your computer, we can dump it out in the clear for analysis. And given this is created using .NET, we can decompile this to get human-readable code. That includes the configured IP address, campaign ID, any decoy message displayed to a user, and if they have configured it, the key used to encrypt these parameters. So without further delay, let's get into it. I'm going to show you a way to take a Redline injector and extract the IP address, campaign ID, decoy message, and key used in any given Redline Stealer sample, using only 2 tools, Hollows Hunter and DNSpy. I will then show a quick and dirty way I've devised to take this one step further and automate the process using PowerShell, Hollows Hunter, and ilspycmd. If we take a look at some of these injectors that we've got using Detected Easy, we can see that this one is compiled with min.gw. Doesn't say anything about using .NET. If we look at the next sample, we have it in Visual Studio C and C++. This is pretty consistent across the samples that I have here, in that none of them are using the .NET programming language in order to inject the particular piece of malware. Now, I don't actually care about this because I only want the deobfuscated and injected payload, so I'm going to set up Hollows Hunter to continuously run using the loop and kill parameters so that once the payload hits memory, we'll dump it out and kill the malicious processes. From here, I'm going to run all the malware and see what happens. Good on you, Barry. Taking one for the team. Sorry, I stuttered a bit there, but yeah, good on you, Barry. All right, so let's move over to the VM. We're going to delete Hollows Hunter dump so there's nothing that pollutes this particular presentation. Let's run Hollows Hunter. We're going to do it with loop, and we're going to do it with kill. We're going to see a lot of access denied or could not access because we're not running this as administrator, and this is looping through every single process, and basically it's not able to access anything that's running with higher privileges than we're running it. But that's okay because we're going to be running the malware just with our own user access. So let's do it. Let's fire up the FortniteHacks. Fortnite loader, yeah, Fortnite. Yeah, I'm gonna run that too, and the Fortnite mod menu, and okay. So we've been presented with this error 404, which, as many people will know, doesn't make a lot of sense. Error 404 means that you cannot connect to something because the resource cannot be found. However, this isn't connecting to the internet, and this is actually just a decoy message that we have set up. So as Hollows Hunter begins to respond again, naturally the injection of this particular piece of malware and the processes attempting to do it has slowed down the machine and the analysis. But as soon as this actually starts to run, you can see on the right-hand side, we are detecting the .NET payload in memory, dumping it out and killing the processes. And now you can see there is 5 processes that have been dumped, which is right on the money for the 5 samples that we ran of this particular piece of malware. So let's cancel this. All right, from here, what we're gonna do is open up one of these process dump samples in DNSpy. We're gonna examine the classes, and it's not always clear which one is the main entry point and contains the configuration details of the malware. However, we can either search through it for this particular configuration class, or we can step through it with the DNSpy debugger itself. So let's take a look. Opening up DNSpy, we're going to open up the 32-bit version of DNSpy because there is a good chance that this is leveraging a 32-bit binary to be injected. We're going to open it up. It also doesn't matter if it's using a 64-bit binary to be injected. We can still open it up through this and it can still decompile. You just won't be able to debug it unless you're using the right version. Okay, so let's look at our tools, our hollows dump, and let's just take the first process dump here. So we can see this one's called happy. We are definitely happy that we've been able to dump this out of memory. So that's the original name of this particular piece of malware. You can see that there's Chrome with some spacing using underscores, which is a little bit interesting. Maybe it doesn't want to be using the Chrome b.Name because maybe that's going to flag on something. And there's a few other interesting classes in here as well. So already we begin to start to raise some eyebrows. This actually has something called entry point, which is perfect because this has given us what we wanted. The IP, the ID, the message, and the key. We didn't need to debug it. It just had entry point as the name, which gave us where we were able to get the particular configuration. Let's delete all these dump processes though. Let's perform this again, except this time we're going to automatically dump out the various configuration parameters. We're going to launch all of this with PowerShell to make the process streamlined, and you can see that there's no dumps available to extract the configuration information from. So closing this off, nothing. There is nothing to pollute this experiment. And what we're going to do is run back to our PowerShell terminal. So we're just going to copy in the script that I've devised for this purpose. And so it may be a little bit to look at first, but basically it's just starting Hollows Hunter to do the same thing, looping and killing. Then it's going to wait for about 5 seconds, and then it's going to fire off all the malware. So it's going to start all the different malware processes that we've got sitting in the FortniteHacks directory. Then it's going to wait for about 60 seconds. Hopefully this gives it enough time to actually run the malware, inject into memory, and then we can dump it out. After the dumping out occurs, hopefully PowerShell will be able to look at all of these particular decompiled executables, look at all these executables, decompile them using ilspycmd, and then grep across this for IP, which is the configuration parameter that we know 3 characters after is going to be the rest of the configuration. Now, this does use grep, which isn't native in PowerShell in Windows. However, I do have another version which I've been creating, which is a little bit more syntax to dump it out using the select string parameter. But let's show this first. So we fire it off. We've got the memory analyze occurring, the memory analysis. Now we've got all the malware starting. We've got our error 404 again. No worries. Hopefully this does it quickly enough. Otherwise, we may need to run the final PowerShell command again if we haven't given it long enough timeout. Looks like some injection just occurred there, possibly. Still scanning through. Haven't dumped anything out yet. Okay, we've begun dumping them out, which is great because on the right-hand side, we haven't had this start to analyze anything yet. Beautiful. As you can see, we've now launched the malware, scanned memory, dumped the payloads, and extracted using ilspycmd and PowerShell. Those of you with a keen eye, like I said, will notice that it's using grep, but I'll show you the same thing just using select string and a little bit more effort. And others will notice that the IP address and IDs here are base64 encoded on many samples. That's because they're also exclusive or encrypted with that key that's mentioned here. So let's take I'll just quickly show you this running through. This is all native. Now it's using select string. It's not using grep, and it will do the same thing. Goes through, gives us the exact same configuration of these particular samples. Beautiful. Beautiful. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a particular sample here. I'm just going to take the first one with this particular IP address that's base64 encoded, and we're going to look at how we can decode this. Well, decode it and decrypt it, I should say. So moving over to Cybershift, if we dump this input in, you will notice, let's turn off everything. It's gibberish. It's base64 encoded, sure, but it's gibberish, and that's because of the XOR encryption which occurs. And then it's also going to be base64 encoded again after that. So let's take the key. The key that we extracted here is OTRIA. So if we put that in using UTF-8, because it's in essentially clear text, we're going to see that it dumps out the IP address that this is configured to beacon back to, and the port. Now let's take the message from that sample as well, because there was a message in there that was base64 encoded and XOR encrypted. And you can see that's error 404. That was that fake error message we saw when the malware launched. So that's all from me today. This concludes the video on how to take a Redline, steal a malware sample, and dump the configuration of this malware for tracking and IOC extraction. We could take it one step further and actually include some sort of exclusive OR operation of base64 decoding with PowerShell. But at this point, it's CyberIGU signing off.